Welcome to the Dr. Lynn Santiago podcast. Since a young child, Dr. Lynn has had an unquenchable passion for psychology, concepts of self, and personal growth. Dr. Lynn interviews guests who answer the question, are we always becoming? Her guests include psychologists, mental health counselors, life coaches, spiritual counselors, consultants, authors who have been on a quest for knowledge and now dedicate their lives to helping others in the process of becoming. Be inspired by the personal becoming stories told by guests who share the risks and the challenges, the successes and the letdowns, the joys and the heartaches they each experience while on their own becoming journey. Now here's your host, Dr. Lynn Santiago.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. This is a Quest episode. Now, I got to interview licensed mental health counselor Jamie Molnar. Jamie's also a yoga instructor and a Gallup certified Strengths Finder coach, which I did not know what that meant. So I did ask, and so you will learn more about what that is. Jamie is also the owner of Be Your Best Self and Thrive counseling practice. You know, I learned so much from Jamie in a very pretty brief interview. Just packed with so much information. She shares how she blends the philosophy of yoga with psychology when she's working with her clients. And you're going to hear her talk about what it means to her, what becoming means to her. One of the other things that I learned from her was that she introduces me to Joseph Campbell, the Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey. And I looked it up after the interview because I had never heard of it before. And I was just like, wow, how did I miss this? It is almost perfect alignment with what I mean and what many of my guests have talked about when we refer to becoming journeys and becoming stories. So I'm going to post more about that on Instagram. Some of the other things that you're going to learn about when you listen to Jamie is that she is real clear about what it means to listen to your calling and to live your life authentically and with purpose. So let's get to it. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
It's wonderful for you to be here as well. I'm so excited. This is a Quest episode. So what that means is that you are somebody in a professional helping field that you have really dedicated part of your life and learning how to help others and help others on their becoming journey. So I look forward to asking you all kinds of questions and learning more about you.
Awesome.
Okay. And we have Willow here with us. Willow is a St. Leo intern, psychology intern. So I just wanted to introduce her to you.
Yes. Hi, Willow.
Hi.
Okay. So, Jamie, I asked the same question of all my guests.
Okay.
Are we always becoming?
Well, in my opinion, yes. The short answer would be yes. I think the journey to becoming, self-actualized or becoming fully conscious, right? All of those different terms is a lifelong journey. I think that we can go through different phases in life, different developmental stages that impact that journey. But I think we are always in the process of becoming, whatever that may be, however we define that. And I think it's a beautiful process, but it can also be jarring at times and hard and challenging. And I think the real heroes are the ones that are willing to fight through the challenges, the obstacles, and keep going, right? Keep working towards becoming who they really are, coming home to themselves.
Yes, I definitely want to know more about that concept. The hero's journey home, I think is what you call it. That's great. I I agree with you so much about how it can be very hard, and I think it takes a lot of courage. And I
Mhm.
really always commend my clients for the courage that they have, right, to be willing to kind of go down that road and disclose and be vulnerable and to take chances and risks and all of that. And
Right.
look into dark corners that they have may not have seen looked in a long time.
Oh yes, the shadow pieces
Yes.
of ourselves are very confronting.
Yeah.
But when we learn to integrate the shadow, the dark and the light, that's where the true peace is found. And I think that those are that are willing to do that work really have a very different human experience than those that maybe don't have access to that or afraid of that or don't know how or can't, right? Like it really is quite a journey,
Mhm.
but very powerful and worth it. I can say
Yeah.
that professionally and personally, it's worth it, folks. Do the work, it's worth it.
What do you think gets in people's way? I mean, I always talk about the obstacles. Like, what are some of the obstacles that you have found that get in people's way of that?
Well, I think there's a lot of different obstacles depending on, where you're from in the world and, what your background is. I think that in kind of modern day times, one of the obstacles is just the stigma still associated with mental health and becoming and really exploring that aspect of the self. I think that we're seeing a tremendous difference, like a tremendous stride forward with that. But there's always been a stigma around seeking help. And different cultures, I think, also we can see that even more, right? Certain cultures, it's just taboo to seek out help or admit that there's any sort of mental health issue. And that really can prevent people from seeking that kind of support. I think also it can be just the fear of the process, not understanding what exactly it is, not understanding, what counseling feels like, looks like, what you're going. I think sometimes the fear of even doing it can supersede the symptoms that we're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then sometimes again, so many factors. Another factor is sometimes when we're really distressed, like really depressed, really anxious, the thought of trying to do something different is almost more difficult than just staying in the state that we're in.
Yeah.
So a lot of folks find it easier to just kind of stay stuck because we know that space is comfortable, it's familiar. Even though it sucks, we know it. And so sometimes the idea of making big changes or seeking out help can feel even more overwhelming than the stuckness or the symptoms that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it could be all of that for one person. It could be one of those things. I think it's just so many factors in what could prevent someone from getting help when they need it.
Yeah.
Could be access, right? Like if you're in an area where there isn't a lot of mental health resources, or maybe you don't have that kind of support in the area that you're in or education around that. That's another piece. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different pieces that could contribute to someone
Absolutely.
not getting the help they need.
What what led you into the field of mental health counseling?
Well, that's a story, I tell you.
Well, we all have our becoming stories, so that's want to hear it.
Oh goodness, how do I condense this in a Cliff Notes version? Well, I went to college thinking I was going to be a film major, and was a film major, and I thought I was going to go to Hollywood and make films. And this will tell my age, but around the time that I went to college was when Fight Club came out and movies like that are really philosophical and had like deeper layers. And so when I was in college, I was like, I'm going to start taking psychology and philosophy classes so I can be like a really rich, deep filmmaker, and like really say something to the world. And that's when I fell into philosophy. I became an existentialist and like just went down that path for a while. And it wasn't until I took neuropsychology that I was like, this is interesting. I really like this brain behavior stuff. And that's when I kind of really decided to move into the world of psychology. I went to Australia and did my master's program there and lived in Australia and worked.
Wow.
I thought I was going to do neuropsychology for a while. And then after I did it and I studied it, I was like, this is kind of boring. I mean, I love the outcome of neuropsych, but just doing the same tests over and over again just didn't quite speak to me. So I ended up doing clinical psychology. I mean, I was doing clinical psychology there, but shifted the focus, and then been in a variety of different roles since there. I've been in the field for about 16 years now and done a bunch of different things, and all that led me to kind of where I'm at now, where I own my own private practice. And then I also have a business where I help other empaths, healers, highly sensitives build businesses that are thriving. So,
Okay, so that I definitely want to understand more about. I know that you're a yoga teacher,
I am.
and I know based on what I read from your website that you like to take a holistic approach,
Mhm.
and that you are also a coach. Is that where you do more of that kind of what you're saying with healers or other work at Gallup Certified Strengths Finder Coach? Let's start there. What is that?
So, so I worked in higher ed for many years, and I was very lucky to be trained as a Gallup Strengths Finder certified coach while I was at USF, actually. Shout out to my USF folks. And Gallup Strengths Finder is, so Gallup, I'm sure you're familiar with Gallup, like the polling company. And
Yes.
yeah, everybody knows Gallup, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what people don't know is Gallup actually has a huge foot in organizational psychology and corporate world. And the Strengths Finder was developed by a team of positive psychologists at Gallup that looked at what if we were to help people understand their strengths rather than weaknesses. So if we started talking to people about what they're good at rather than what they're not good at, how might that change the way people show up at work? And so the Gallup Strengths Finder is a test that there's 34 kind of themes or strengths, if you will. And once you take the test, you get your top 5 strengths that really help people understand how they operate. So we teach people how to operate from a strengths perspective rather than a deficit perspective.
Yeah.
So we teach managers and companies, like, rather than having an annual review and talking about all the things that person needs to work on and where they suck, like, what if we were to talk about where we all shine and how they can use those strengths to overcome the challenges that they're facing? So it's really offering a different perspective to organizations in terms of leadership and management, because 70% of employees leave managers, not the jobs themselves.
Wow, yes.
The Strengths Finder is a great tool. Anyone can buy the book and take the test and get the results. And there's lots of Strengths Finder coaches out there. And it's just a really great way to develop a better understanding of yourself and how you work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that applied to kind of that idea of being on a becoming path? That, we have one path, but there's a lot of, I don't know, maybe lanes would be a great way of saying it, right? There's that academic lane and the career lane, and then the personal family lane. And, so it sounds like when you're talking about this Strengths Finder coach, it's uh, identifying the strengths on that becoming journey that is career based.
It can be, but we actually used it in a lot of schools and higher universities use Strengths Finder to help students develop an understanding of their strengths as a person and help them develop ideas around what career paths will be good for them, what study habits work for them, that kind of thing. So while it is huge in the corporate world, it's also quite big in higher education. And it really can be applied to anything. So anyone that wants to stop thinking about weakness, stop thinking about or focusing on what they're not good at, and really understand what they are good at, it will help you in relationships, in your career, in your family, just all of that. It's really based in that positive psychology kind of perspective. That helps people really tap into the power of who they already are rather than trying to be someone they're not.
Right. So it's that being more authentic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. It's being able to tap into what is really authentically you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I think people, when they take that test, it's like, oh, that's why I do that. That's actually a strength, not a problem. Right. So it's like, I felt the same when I took it. like, oh, that explains a lot. You know,
Mhm.
it's really helpful. And now I really own my strengths profile. It's in my email signature. So I think it's really great to kind of own who you are and
Mhm.
announce that regularly to the world.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So how uh, was yoga? Did yoga come before psychology and counseling, or does psychology counseling come before yoga for you?
So I dabbled in yoga since college, but I didn't get serious about it until 2012 when I did my yoga teacher training. And that was after I had it. I'm a cancer survivor, so I went through a really horrific cancer journey. And when I came out the other end, I started seeking meaning and purpose in life, and kind of I was really lost emotionally. And so I turned to yoga and started looking at that at a deeper level than what I had in the past. I attended classes and did trainings, but not the philosophical side really. And so that's when that journey began. And then as I kind of went into that world deeper and deeper, that's how I kind of learned to blend yoga and psychology together into one kind of format that I think is really powerful, which is yoga psychology.
Yes, I saw that on your the bio. So how does that help people? I mean, how do you use that as one of those ways that you help others?
Yeah, so I find that yoga is a science. It's a kind of it's a script almost, or lessons that offer you a whole different way of being, a whole different way of approaching life. So it's not just the postures that you see in the class. The postures are great, but there's actually 8 different limbs to yoga, and asana, or the postures that we do in the yoga classes, is just one of those limbs. And so it's a really beautiful system on how to live a more peaceful life, how to become connected to the world around you, to the divine or the universe or God, or however you define that above you. And it provides, moral lessons. It provides breathing practices, lifestyle, meditation, all different elements that help people on that path.
Mhm.
And so it's just a beautiful system. And it's very similar to Jungian psychology, where we're looking at, where our place is individually and then within the collective, right? Like, how do we contribute to the collective? How do we give back in a positive way? And there's a lot of themes that cross over between Jungian psychology and yoga philosophy. And so that's how looking at the shadow, the archetypes, the kind of be on the journey of becoming your true self, coming home to yourself, right? Yoga philosophy is very similar. And so I blend a lot of the elements of the two in my work with folks to help them feel better, right? Let go of whatever is causing them distress and find their kind of balance, if you will. For the folks that already do yoga, I can use some more of the language. They're a little more familiar with it, and they often come to me because they know I can speak to them in that language. But even folks that are not familiar with yoga, I infuse it in everything that I do. So I may not necessarily use the language itself, but I'm still providing those tools and that kind of perspective in our work
Okay.
together.
Do you do yoga in your therapy sessions?
No. So for
Okay.
me, I can write sequences for postures if people are asking for that. And I
Mhm.
do that. Or we'll review, certain our mat, our journey on the mat teaches us a lot about ourselves, because it is yoga is in essence a moving meditation. And so if there's certain postures that you're struggling with, or that you avoid, right, or that you love, that tells us a lot about the mind body. And so people can
Mhm.
bring that into the session and we can review that. But a lot of the work that I do in the sessions is more around like pranayama techniques, so breathing techniques, which is very helpful for anxiety and trauma, building the mind body connection. The philosophy, so the ways of creating more balance and peace in your life, the kind of moral and ethical codes by which yogis tend to live by, live through. So it tends to be a little more macro than specifically. I don't really do yoga sequences in this session. It's more talk therapy, if you will.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
So, what is the hero journey home? What is that?
Well, the hero's journey is a template that was developed by Joseph Campbell, who's a professor of American literature. And it's kind of describing the journey to becoming the authentic self, right? So there's it's like a circle or a sequence that we all go through, and we'll go through this sequence multiple times in life, right? So it'll start with hearing the call, right? We hear the call, something's not working, something is not right. That's when we seek out the help, right? That's when we're like, wow, this is not working. I need to make a change. And so we start on that journey of making a change. And along that way, there's a lot of obstacles that come our way. And it's us moving through those obstacles and figuring out how to kind of become this new person or next version of ourselves. We can even come down to the abyss where it feels awful and horrible. And this, why did I do this in the first place? Right? Like this doesn't sound good. And then then we can come back through and end up kind of at the final destination, which is our truth or our true self. Mm-hmm. And so people can go through that cycle kind of many times throughout life. We all do, kind of with your theme of the becoming, right?
It's just like right in line with that.
Yeah. It's actually a really good system for what you talk about on your podcast. It really is aligned.
So who's the author again?
Joseph Campbell.
Okay.
And you see, actually, since he developed this template, you see this throughout modern day film and literature. So like the Star Wars series, movies, right? Like all of those movies follow Joseph Campbell's template. So there's a lot of movies that actually use that kind of sequence in their narrative, in their story, right? Of the hero becoming who they are, right? Coming themselves, which you would see in the Star Wars series if you know the story, right? So it's and it's based on kind of Jungian concept of, coming home to your authentic self, kind of discovering yourself, those kinds of themes. So, yeah.
So that makes me think about, and I'm going to throw it out there to you, that the idea that people say, you have lessons to learn in life, right? And it will always come back to you until you learn it. And I visualize that as sort of the spiral that you kind of, you come back to it, but you're like at a higher, the next level, and then you come back to it, and then you come back to it, and you come back to it. It's like the same lesson, but now kind of applied to the current situation with the knowledge and experience that you kind of took with you from the past, those past experiences or being there. But that would say that, the lesson is never really 100% learned, that it's like you kind of keep going around. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that can be rooted in so many things. So it could be our own lesson that we need to learn, or our own trauma that we've been through, and we're repeating kind of behavior patterns or cycles, and we haven't learned how to overcome that. It could be ancestral trauma, right? Or generational trauma. It could be family narratives and ancestry that is coming up that we're having to now kind of hold and heal for our family line. So I think there's a lot of different ways in which that can show up. And it really comes down to kind of what we were circling back to what we were talking about before, which is like the willingness to explore that and do that work and really understand that. And I think that's when we kind of move those obstacles aside and we move on to the next lesson. And we're like, okay, that one's done. Like, got it. Now it's on to the next, Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of different ways in which that can show up depending on, our personal journey, our family, our lineage, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. If you believe in past lives, like what was your life before? Were there lessons you didn't learn in that life?
Yeah, that's
having to repeat now.
It's like forever and infinite. And
yeah.
So when you say the hero's journey, hero is coming from that idea that it takes courage. Is that what you're?
Yeah, I mean, it takes courage, and in essence, we're all a hero, right? Like when you are wanting to do the work to come home to yourself, that is the journey. That's what it's all about. And in essence, you are the hero. So we all have our own hero's journey home.
Mhm.
And it does take courage, and it takes the willing, like, you know, a lot of people may hear the call and ignore it, right? Because it might be easier to ignore. They don't have the resources, or they're not even aware enough to like notice the call, and then they're stuck in patterns and loops, right?
Mhm.
So it's our job in the field, I believe, to provide that education and access to help everyone kind of find themselves and
Mhm.
come back to themselves in whatever way that means for them. So yeah,
So
we're
what do you
all
think about, because when when you say finding that, hearing that call and knowing what that calling is, and for me that was, it was clear. I'm very fortunate that from a very young age I knew I always wanted, I had an interest in psychology and I knew I wanted to be a psychologist. Really
okay.
what I wanted to be was a psychotherapist, but I thought they were the same and I didn't realize that I actually didn't need to be a psychologist to be a psychotherapist. That came later. But from
Right.
a very young age, I really felt drawn and pulled to that. And even though I might have gone off course a little everywhere, once in a while here in my life, it always came back. Like I always wound up back on that path. But I don't think there are some people who don't, like you said, hear it. And you hear people say, well, I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know what the meaning of life is, or what meaning my life has. Right. And so what are your thoughts, what are your thoughts about that as far as the message that you give people who think, well, I don't have a purpose.
Well, I think that in our culture, in Western culture, purpose often gets equated with career. And that's part of the problem, is that like we're a hustle and bustle culture, and it's, you know, success driven and money driven. And so if you're not in a career that's passionate about, then you have no purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for all folks that really maybe have other find meaning in other things, they often feel like because that's not in their job, they're not good enough, or they're
Yeah.
not aligned with what we're supposed to be doing. And so I think purpose kind of gets mixed with like success, career success. And that's part of the issue, is helping people define what meaning and purpose is to them separate to that. Now, of course, nobody wants to be in a career that sucks, that they hate, right? Like nobody wants that.
Right. But
But
people wind up on that in those careers. This comes up almost every time I have a conversation when I'm having these conversations with guests. It's the same thing. It always comes back up, which is people working or pursuing a career that isn't really
yeah,
who they are, and then wind up, that's kind of what happened. One of the things that gets a person stuck, because
yeah,
now they have the financial responsibilities and families and all kinds of things.
yeah. Yeah, we can. I mean, a lot of people are just not aligned to what they really want, or where their
Mhm.
talents shine, or they haven't figured out how to make their talent or work their talents into the work that they're in, right? So there's just that's where all of this comes in. Having a therapist to help you tease all of this out and make sense of it is really helpful, right? Because to try and figure all this out in your own head is
Right.
it can be really overwhelming. And so I think just having a sacred space to explore that, and it is just tremendous in itself, right? Even to think
Yeah.
of options or understand things maybe in a different way than how you've been approaching life up until now, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that's like my one gripe with passion and purpose is it can get a little blurred in terms of like what we think
Mhm.
it should be and what it might actually be.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts about that? The meaning or the purpose is, and you talk about aligned, that it is. Is it in any way, mm, that it gives back, or it's something that's greater than themselves? That.
Yeah, so that is huge in both yoga and Jungian psychology. Is not only like finding your purpose on this earth is about you finding your true kind of self, but also how does that self fit within the collective. So in yoga, it's all about like whatever talent, skill, whatever you have, yes, we want to develop that, but it needs to contribute to society, right? Like we need to have a positive relationship with the community that we're in. And we need to be in this energetic exchange with the community to kind of help the collective as a whole. Like we are all part of this collective, whether we like it or not. And so if we're not kind of aligned and then we're not contributing in a positive way, it reverberates within the collective. And so that's the whole point, right? Is to help people kind of find themselves and be their best version of themselves so that they can give back to the collective and we can all kind of elevate, right?
Right.
So it's a huge part of yoga philosophy as well as Jungian psychology. You are not separate from society. You are part of the community. So it's part of your community, the local community, your family, right? Like how does your personality or your existence, if you will, like how does that interact or exchange with the world around you in a positive way? And if it's negative, how do you deal with that and then shift that? Yeah.
Sometimes it's things that I'm just thinking, for example, a conversation I had with a client about that his purpose at that time was being a grandfather.
Yeah.
And that you talk about intergenerational trauma that this, that he had experienced. He was a survivor of childhood trauma, and he had, was breaking the chain, right? Breaking that. And he certainly raised his kids differently, but now he's in this grandfather role, which is like the wise man, right? And that is his purpose, because he struggled with that. He's like, I don't know what the purpose, maybe that's what it is right now, is to be this child's grandfather.
Right. And that's a beautiful example, right? At
Mm-hmm.
different developmental stages of life, your purpose may shift, and that's okay. Your core values shift. I do my core values every year. My one core value that's guiding me this year is very different than what it was 3 years ago based on who I am, where I was in life, And so this is a process that ebbs and flows and changes. And so I think when we're too rigid or have this like prescription for how we think things are supposed to be, when we start shoulding ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's when it can go awry. And so, I think it's finding the beauty and simplicity in the simple things, in the kind of even the mundane, the daily life, right? Like there's beauty in that. And sometimes that's what it's all about. It's not about these big glamorous kind of
Exactly.
experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. And you don't necessarily know what it's going to look like. I've had this conversation with Willow and with other guests, the same idea that you might think that where you're going and what it looks like, and you have a vision, you need one to kind of, help yourself stay aligned.
yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily going to look the way you think it's going to look. It could be like, whoa, I had never thought I would wind up here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And
think
again,
that
it comes back to that like exploration of the self too, right? When we talk about empaths and highly sensitive folks, how much of your life or your behavior, even your job, is rooted in trauma and not necessarily your actual purpose or passion, right?
right.
So being able to do this individual work and really explore those pieces helps you become more aligned, more aware, and move in a direction that feels more authentic.
Right. So talk a little bit about what you have an agency or a private practice. What's the name of it?
Yes, so I am the owner of Be Your Best Self and Thrive Counseling, and we are a holistic mind, body, spirit counseling practice in downtown St. Petersburg. We offer in-person and online sessions to folks all over Florida. We offer individual, teens, couples, and family counseling. So all of us are very holistic, very mind, body, spirit kind of aligned in our work. We're very passionate about that. And it is infused in everything that we do. So that's the Be Your Best Self and Thrive counseling. I'm really proud of what we've built there. An amazing team. And then I'm also co-founder of the Visionaries Collective, which is a consulting agency for empaths and healers that want to move from surviving to thriving, right? So we're passionate about helping other healers create a life and business that they love. Because being a business owner and being an empath or a healer are two very different identities.
Yes, that
And a
is
very
so.
unique experience. So we're really passionate about helping other healers meld those two things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So those are the two things that I do. Yeah.
Okay. And so there are other therapists in your practice. It's like a group practice.
Yes. So I have three other clinicians in my practice. Kate Daigle, who has certifications in holistic nutrition and is really good with couples and individuals, life transitions, college age students, the millennial generation. Genevieve May specializes in teens and young adults and loves helping LGBTQIA plus folks kind of find themselves and navigate the challenges that they may face. And then Elena Simonson focuses on anxiety, self-compassion, self-esteem, and trauma and addictive behaviors. So she does a lot of work with addictive behaviors. So that's us. That's our team.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we really have an interesting. Well, it definitely aligns with my beliefs as far as the idea of being on a becoming journey and
Yeah.
always becoming, and it is just aligns exactly, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't
So,
realize that. So we were talking like, wow, we're actually really aligned.
yes.
We do.
Yes,
That's
yes.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I love it.
So we have about 5 minutes. Is there anything you want to add? I know you've talked about some of your own personal experiences that I do assume that those experiences have uh, affected you or it affected you in some way as far as your, where you're going in your journey. Anything you want to share about any of your own personal experiences?
I think so. I had a pretty kind of horrific journey in with my cancer story, and that's a whole nother story, but it was a really tough time in my life, and it took me a long time to kind of come back from that. And I think that one of the greatest lessons I learned was that it's when we go through like some kind of big massive trauma like that, whether it's health trauma, whether it's it's family abuse, any kind of trauma, really, any major event like that, it's not always about getting back to who you were before that. I hear that a lot, and I tried to do that. And the cancer journey was kind of my call, right? Like my wake up call, and it changed me forever. And I think in the beginning I resisted that because I just wanted to get back to the way things were. I just wanted to get to erase this from my, erase this from my life. And what I realized is it actually made me who I am. And these kinds of events actually change the trajectory for us, and that's not a bad thing. It's a new normal that you will find, and that's a good thing, not a bad thing. It's part of life. And so I just really encourage anyone that's going through like a health trauma or a journey or anything like that, any kind of traumatic experience, knowing that there's likely going to be a new life for you on the other side. That don't worry so much about trying to get back to who you were before. You're a new person now. This is a new you, and that's a good thing, not a bad thing. And it's just part of the journey. And I'm at the stage now where I'm incredibly grateful for my cancer experience because it opened my eyes to how I was approaching life before and where I was headed, and totally shifted things for me. And I come from a place of gratitude for it. And it took me a long time to get there because it was incredibly traumatic. But I am a very different person now. There's still pieces of me from before, of course, but
Of course.
I'm a different person, and that I've learned that that's a positive thing, not a negative thing. And so, yeah, that's like my biggest message to folks is that life can change you, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right. I think that's that when we talk about the becoming journey, that those things that we might see as obstacles or barriers that we have to find a way around or through or over, that it's doing that process of getting around it, through it, over, that adds to who we are and
Yeah.
adds to where we're going and who we're becoming.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, it's hard to see that during, and sometimes you just have to, you're in survival mode. You just have to push through and get to the other side, and that's part of it, and it sucks, and having support around that is important. But the Winston Churchill quotes always come to me, and that's one of them is just never, 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 never give up. And then another one was, if you find yourself in hell, just keep moving, just keep going. You know? And I think it's so true. And those quotes really help me, like remind me even in just keep going, you know, we'll get there. Just don't stop, you know, and then you will find the light at the end of the tunnel. It is there.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was going to ask you if you wanted to close with a message, but I think you just did. I think there it goes. I want to give you opportunity to give contact information where people, listeners, can get a hold of you, or phone number, website, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So we're on Instagram at BYBS and Thrive. That's our handle. And our website is the same. So bybsandthrive.com. And we're on Facebook, the same. The Visionaries Collective is just thevisionariescollective.com, or you can just Google my name and you'll find all those different things. So happy to connect with anyone that is needing support or needs referrals. I have a huge network. So if it's not me or my team, I'm always happy to help find that right person for you. And if you're a therapist or a healer and you're wanting to chat more, feel free to reach out to me. I'm pretty open book. I'm pretty transparent. So I'm happy to tell you what you need to know. So yeah.
It's been a real pleasure talking to you and getting to meet you. And it's one of the great things about what I'm doing, which I never would have imagined I would be doing a podcast. And I love it, but it's kind of the me that kind of transformed into this. And I love education. I love psychology. And to have the opportunity now to meet all kinds of different people that I never would have had these conversations with, right? And so I'm pleased to be able to have met you and have this conversation with you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a real joy chatting with you, and I love how aligned we are, and I love having these conversations. So thank you for holding space for us and, doing this with me. It's been great.
You are welcome. You have a great week.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. I really learned so much from Jamie, and I am so appreciative for her introduction to Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. I will definitely be posting more about him and this concept on Instagram. One of the many messages Jamie shared was to remember that life can change you, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think this is really important to remember, especially if you are going through some hardship, you have had a trauma, you're going through a difficult challenge in your life, such as the death of a loved one, divorce, a loss of a job. It's important to remember that you will get through and you will get to the other side. So I'm going to end with a quote from Winston Churchill that Jamie shared. If you're going through hell, keep going. Thank you for listening to my podcast. You can give others hope and inspiration by sharing this with your friends and family. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at becoming_ with _Dr. Lynne. That's DrLynne. Thank you.